My name is John and Rodgers, and I am so glad to see you here this afternoon. Are you surviving the day? Are you doing well?
Final. We're doing great.
That's right, yeah. If you nod off, I'm not going to throw anything at you, I promise. I won't hold it against you. I won't take it personally.
I'll just ridicule you.
That's right, yeah. It's a full day here, isn't it? And it's going to be long days. So, but thank you for being here this afternoon. I am very grateful for the opportunity to be able to present, and I appreciate Dr. Randall Bradley and the staff here and their help in enabling us to come and be a part of this conference. Hope you are finding things that are helpful for you in your various places of service and ministry. This is the final of 3 sessions today that have been geared towards the student choir experience. I am grateful and thankful to have had about 10 plus years in doing full-time student choir ministry in different places. Most recently, come on in everyone, good to see you. Most recently, I have been the past 5 years on faculty at Lee University. But even more recently than that, I have just left that position to be back into full-time ministry at a church where I used to serve in Birmingham, Alabama, Hunter Street Baptist Church. That's where I first started to do student choir ministry. Need more? Okay, great. Hallelujah. And the heavens open.
You're so smart to always put out just a few.
Yeah. It helps my ego when they always say, not reflected in the other section. Anyway, so we're wrapping up today. Maybe this would have been a good session to start with today, but it would have been at 8 o'clock and you might have been warm in the bed still at that time. I don't know. But we're ending today with this idea of Demolition Derby. I think there's several people here that are in one of these 3 categories. Something about this interested you. You're either needing to build a choir, you're maybe renovating a student choir, and we all need to live in this lap. My goodness, I am just overjoyed. Okay, do we have, there's handouts there at the chair, folks. Just grab that as you come in. And you won't offend me by walking across the front here. The holiest of people are in the front. Okay.
You're going to develop a loop or something.
So, because of our side, not knowing what to predict, I had an idea about doing some group work, but we're not going to do that, okay? I'm going to punt that. So you're going to see that on the session slides here, but we're just going to thinking on our feet here. I'll amend this a little bit. How many of you currently have a student choir? Raise your hands, please. Very nice. Hands down. How many of you would you consider yourself, you're here because you're thinking about needing to make some intentional changes or adjusting what you're currently doing if you have a student choir? Who feels like they're in that category? Okay, all right, good, thank you. How many of you are needing to build? Who's going to start one? Our most aggressive of folks. And we're going to have a prayer time at the end. We're going to hold on. We're going to lay hands on you. And okay, no, that's good. Very good. That helps me kind of see what we're representing here. That's wonderful. I call this interaction. We're not going to do groups, but I will put these questions up here. 2 questions to start. We're going to have various questions layered through the presentation. There's a lot of information here in the handout. As I've said in my other 2 sessions, I hate leaving a session not having material that I can use, even if it's more material than I need. Okay, so I'm hoping if I super pack in a lot of stuff, there'll be at least something that will grab your attention and you could use. And yes, feel free to fill in the blanks, all right? Good Baptist sermon note taking, all right? One of these questions, think about if you want to respond. You can respond, some of you, if you want to both of them. But what is maybe your biggest fear or intimidation as you lead your student choir? Maybe you're not leading one. Maybe you're here and you're thinking about it. But what is that question you need answered in order to move forward? Regardless of what position you're starting from. Think about that for a minute. And the floor is yours. Anyone want to fire away? Yep.
I'm not the leader, my wife is, but I know that she's afraid of numbers, not having enough.
Good.
to keep it going, but having enough that if you didn't do one, they would miss out.
Anybody resonate with that? Very good. Anyone else? Yes, more handouts. Really? Wow.
You're just a popular guy.
I am gonna sleep so well tonight, you have no idea. Okay. No. I have, I think. Someone else here? One of these questions, anyone? Biggest fear, or what's a question you need to be getting answered? Not that I'm guaranteeing it's gonna be answered today, but that you're thinking about. Yes, in the back.
Worried about the response of the church and some of the leadership within the youth program at the moment, how supportive they'll be with that idea. And that kind of ties directly with numbers, of course. Yeah.
Very good. Anyone else?
What's the best way to move forward if your pastor's not 100% sold on the youth choir?
Well, you hear that if your pastor-
Or you keep getting where the days of the youth choir passed, I'm going, well, no, maybe not.
Your pastor is hesitant. The days of youth choir over is what he said. How do you move forward with that mindset? Yep.
Or if you have a culture where the youth are too afraid, or they themselves think, I'm not gonna do this, but they have the talent, and they absolutely can sing. I mean, that's the problem in our church, is we're having a wealth of talent that they don't wanna use it.
Yeah.
And it's a big, great opportunity.
Good. Yes,
Some of the phenomena of the unparalleled numbers of school choirs, school arts programs, and why that does not necessarily translate within the context of the church. Why the same student who could even be active in the church is very active in
Yeah.
the school, but does not sense a sacred component of that expression.
Yeah. I'm hearing of that disconnect more and more. I'm also hearing of it, just the diminishment of programs in schools, then therefore negatively affecting the churches as well. They're connected, but it's in a negative way.
And it's not just in the schools. I mean, I'm looking out and wondering if our children's choir program and the de-emphasis that we've placed on that in recent time. I mean, we're seeing that at every stop along the way. And by and large, I'm concerned that we have lost the value of singing together.
And finding time amongst all those other activities that they have, because it seems like people are choosing other things.
Yep.
Sports.
Yes.
Which never happened on Sunday before.
True. Yep. Yep.
Or Wednesday.
A lot of cultural changes there regarding time commitments and involvements and other activities. Definitely, it's a new day. Well, it's been a new day in that way for a while, as you've probably experienced personally. Very good. These are all good things. It sounds dark and brooding, doesn't it? Hope is at the end, I promise you. I really think there is something here for us to think about. Building. Let's talk about building first. And this is a lot. You know, if you've thought a little bit about that topic, session title, one session could be devoted to each. So we're going to be skimming the top here. It's going to be a quick fly-by-night tour. We're not going to stop and park and overnight. We're really going to, but I think there'll be some things here. This is a key question that must be answered by everyone in this room if you're thinking about student choir. Don't answer it here. It's rhetorical. Why does your church need one? Don't answer it out loud. But you must craft an answer for this question. Because if you cannot, it will not happen. If you cannot start from a position of why this needs to occur, then you have no platform in which to promote and argue for it, right? And I hate to use the word argue, but some of you will have to do arguing. Some of you will have to defend. Some of you will have to fight for. Some of you will have to convince. And all of that dialogue starts from answering this question. And there could be a whole list of things you can list here, right? Bullet points that talk from a spiritual standpoint, from a musical standpoint. from a social or relational standpoint for students. There's all sorts of different reasons you can come up with. But you must answer this question in the building process, but regardless of what process you may be in. I think of this in terms of the construction metaphor, so I'm going to return back to this a few times. So in construction, we're having some basement work done in our house. It's in some sense renovating, but we're building a basement out of this an open space. So we really are building here. Finding the right plot of ground. Now that doesn't mean I'm not talking about necessarily you going to the right church to do this. Think a little more globally in this idea, location, 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 right? Construction is all about finding the place to do this. The best way to think about this in terms of building youth choir is maybe finding the right time. Finding the right atmospheric conditions. Your church may need a youth choir, but it might not be this year. It might need to be next year, or maybe a year after that. And you spend 2 years, what my pastor calls plowing the ground, getting the ground ready to receive what it is you're going to try to plant, getting the landscape ready to take on a house, okay, to build something on top of that ground. Think about what that includes in the early stages: the foundations, the framing, the systems, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, the walls, the roof, and then you can get into more detailed things like painting and decorations, okay? All that, think of that's a lot to do, right? The building phase, this construction is really interesting to me. The benefits of the building phase, it is very clear and well defined from the beginning what you want the structure to look like. If any of you have built a house before, it is stressful, but the thing is you get to customize a lot, right? But that's where all the stress can come in. It's because they're calling you and saying, hey, what do you want? What kind of knobs do you want in the cabinets? Hey, what kind of blah, 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 blah. Hey, where's the bathroom going to go? Is it going to face this way, this way, this way, this way? Where's the door going to go? Blah, 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 blah. You know, where's the HVC? You can set all that from the very beginning. You have no baggage from previous directors, good or bad. But you have no baggage, old traditions or preconceived ideas. In some sense, you might think of these sometimes as both a benefit and also a challenge. You're able to clearly establish and define the direction and the vision of what you want to do. You get to decide the architectural drawings of your house, right? You lay it out. You design every aspect of the structure from the very beginning. Not that you won't make changes as time goes along, but you get to speak into that, what it's going to be. As you compare the renovating, that's a different animal. As you've seen all these home shows, sometimes they just start over. They just gut the whole thing, sometimes tear it down to the foundation and start over, because it's easier than renovating in the existing structure because it has some inherent problems in it that cost way too much to try to fix. The challenges, though, as some of you are thinking about and faced, you have no previous student choir concept, which is really hard. You're having to help people see a painting that doesn't exist. I'm a visual person. My wife tells me we moved into a new house in this transition, and the cabinets needed to be redone. We have it's just kind of a dated decor and painting. I'm going to do this color here, blah blah blah. I said, what? And then it's done now, and I think, oh, now I see what you're talking about. But I could not see what she was describing to me. The cabinet, by the way, she redid the whole cabinets. I say yes. I feel like a deadbeat husband. She did the cabinets herself, sanded them, repainted them, glazed them. I helped put them back up. The cabinet doors and all that. But anyway, what a process. But I couldn't see that. I had a hard time seeing that. And you might have people, when you cast this vision for building what it's going to look like, it's a challenge. Shortage of vision from observing parties, whether that may be a staff, that's parents, that's church leaders, that's a deacon board, blah, 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 blah. All these different people that are watching and could support you might have a shortage of vision in being able to see what it is you're trying to do. It's a lot of work. We know this. Some of you know and seen people who have done this before. It is a lot of work to set the vision, to set the agenda, communicating goals, evaluating results without any sort of previous history or model to go off of. That's really challenging. And it just takes time to build momentum. In reality, friends, if you are building, you need to give it at least 3 to 5 years to really get a root system going. We can leave the architectural analogy and go over to agriculture and think about planting a tree. It takes a while for that tree to get a really good root system. I've given you in the handout a single sheet. And we won't look at all of these, but I want you to have this to refer back to. This is from Randy Edwards' book. Some of you know this. We have this nephew in the room, by the way, here, Nathan Edwards. Yes?
I don't claim it.
Yes. What now?
Give me extra.
Sure. Give me just a second. Was it missing one? I'm sorry about that. Yeah, it's in there. Just take the whole thing. Yep. From his book on youth choir ministry, written a couple decades ago now, but there's still some timeless stuff in here. Revealing riches and building lives. You need to get this if you don't have it. There's so much in there to help you in your process. But I pulled some ideas here. He lists questions to stimulate vision. These are things to ask to help you get to that answer from the earlier slide. Why do I need a student choir? And there's some really good things on there. Some of the questions imply that you already have something in place, but I think you can adjust some of them for you in whatever phase you're in, even if you're thinking about building. So let that be something you percolate on, think about in your own time, but I just want to give these questions to you that will help you in the process. Now, one thing I do want to ask you to do is look through the list and pick one question that stands out that you might want to share your answer to that question. Anyone. Pick one question that how you would answer that, and we'll just share your answer with us. There's a lot there. Whenever you're ready, you can just fire away.
Number 4 is interesting to me.
Uh-huh.
Every time I think I get to the smallest number, there's another smaller number coming. Well, I mean, I do have a success story. Okay, so
Good.
Sunday, I think I hit it. Like last Sunday, we had 6 kids.
Okay.
They sang a complete anthem by themselves. We had to redo it a little bit, and we had to assign some solos and put some unison sections in it. But they love the song. I wish I could remember who arranged it, but it's Praise the Lord the Almighty.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked, and the congregation loved it. Nobody came running down there to join them after the service, but 6 is a pretty low number, but it worked. I think if we got a little bit lower than that, we'd have a quartet.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
Sounds like you arranged it.
Anyone else? I like this. This is, I should have done numbers. We can not to do our Roman numeral conversion here. Number 16, what impact will your student choir ministry, could it have, you could say it that way, could it have, on your teenager's future choice of mate, choice of profession, choice of college? It certainly can have an impact. If you believe it or not, I think it can. Or the one, a couple down from that, beneath that, if you could push a magic button, how many pieces of music do you think teenagers could memorize in a year? As I mentioned in an earlier session, they can learn whatever you can teach them. They can learn whatever you can teach them. There is a part of this handout that's missing, but I'm going to rattle them off really quickly. I'm not sure how that happened. He gives some questions on this page of the book. What questions for teenagers in your town or community who have never attended your student choir or never attended your church? I'll throw these out if you want to jot something down that sounds interesting. Here's a question. What could one of your current student choir members say to an unchurched friend to get her attention about your program? What could a current member say to an unchurched person, a friend, about the program, the student choir? Number 2, if your student choir is successful in getting the uninvolved girl or boy to attend a weekly rehearsal, what would bring her or him back for a second or third visit? What would cause her to eventually join? Okay? He says this, answer that previous question, replacing girls with boys, and he adds this. The new guy who has never been to choir is also the captain of his high school basketball team. And there's some groups I know who have those kinds of involved kids in their group. What could get that person back? Good question to ask when you're thinking about building a vision, recruiting, and that's going to be the next thing we're going to talk about. Some foundations for student choir. Okay, and I've listed the, let's see, I'm sorry. Are there blanks there? This is back, this is not on the handout, this is back on the large sheet, okay? Yeah. Foundations for student choir, this is really important. There's several things you can look at there. Teaching scriptures to students by singing biblical passages. You want an environment for healthy adult to teenager mentoring. This is on the sheet. I wasn't going to put this up on the screen because it's just a lot of text. The team spirit of the choir, huge. Mission projects and events allow teenagers to give of themselves to people who cannot help themselves. Developing student leadership, older teenagers discipling younger folks. Regular times of leadership in your choir's schedule. They're singing in worship, say once a month. If not that, maybe twice a semester, or 3 times a semester. This is important, allowing teenagers to see you, the director, as a real person with real struggles. Here's the deal, let them see how a healthy, mature Christian handles the stresses of life. If they come into your choir and don't know anything about your week by the time they leave your rehearsal, I think you failed them. I think if you've not done the Wizard of Oz, pulled the curtain back and seen who's back there running things, at least once or twice in short, simple little snippets of, hey, let me tell you what happened to me this week, and keep it short, that endears them to you and it makes you look, it's making you as a real person, right? It's being vulnerable with them, and they need that adult-to-student interaction. The recruiting piece is huge, and there's several suggestions there for you about some recruiting ideas. The key is to start early, to have a plan, to be intentional, and leverage social media. I didn't emphasize that enough on that. You might want to write that down, but leverage social media. There's all sorts of things you can do. You need to be thinking about, if you start them, how are you going to get them registered and know who's there? A little simple registration process. Some of this you can move online now. If you're fancy enough to have iPads, 1 or 2, you have students get that set up and checked in when they come in rehearsal. There's a lot of different options out there that technology can help you. Rookie training, this is really cool. Maybe having your older kids mentor eventually your new folks as they would be coming into your choir. The assimilation process, that is, how do we get new people assimilated into the choir? How do we get them feeling a part? That is really important. That cannot happen, that won't happen by accident. You have to have a plan. A retreat, huge. That's a great way to start the year. Helps just build momentum. I skipped over one. Getting a kid versus holding on to a kid. Those are 2 very different things. Okay? It's the idea of building a crowd versus growing a choir. You can do one of those 2 things. I think we want to grow a choir as opposed to just building a crowd. Okay? Yeah, a few things like they're getting the kids into the mainstream of what's happening. All the little things, just administrative type stuff. You have to put some time in when you're thinking about building a choir from scratch. Or maybe you just need to revisit that process if you're in the rebuilding phase. Is it being efficient? Is it getting kids connected? Yeah? The last thing that's mentioned there, the glue that holds all of the student choir experience together is friendships. If students leave that choir and don't have a sense of being friends, they don't have friendships, you've missed out on a huge opportunity. There's a quote there, I don't think it's up here, yeah, that I've given you. The only way to have friends is to be one. I tell my children this, my own children this, Emerson's quote on that. Sometimes it's easy to forget. I don't have any friends. We'll be one, right? And you'll have friends. And that kind of mindset, you want to layer into your vision, I think, when you start building a choir.
Jonathan, can I add
Yeah,
something to that?
absolutely, please.
So I had a chance to be an interim at a place that had an existing youth choir, and I will claim Randy as my uncle. So I called him and I said, I need some help with this. And the one bit of advice that he gave me that I really I undervalued at the time, call your kids by name.
It's huge.
I really didn't appreciate that until I did it. Know their names. Kids love to have their names called. It builds their relationships. And I really, for the good of this group, that was a personal bit, and it may be in here, Jonathan, I'm sorry. But
No, that's an obvious overlook, I think. I didn't put it on there.
it really, that was one thing that more than anything gave me that relationship very quickly. Learn their names, call them by their names often. People love to hear their names called.
Yep,
And not when they're in trouble, that's right. I mean,
that's exactly right.
sometimes that's necessary.
Right,
In
but
positive
that's-
ways.
Yeah.
That's not
I
the
know
only
who
way
you
wanna
are.
do it, right.
That's right. Some lagniappe here, a little something extra, those of you who know that Cajun. Mission statement. Form together a mission statement. This may take some time to craft, and do this with a group of students, or with some parents or some staff. That just is a really short way. Maybe you don't have one and you have a choir and you need to form one. Great, do that in your renovating, rebuilding thinking. A very simple, what is it we're trying to do? That's the big question. What are we trying to accomplish? I mentioned that in an earlier session, that you must answer that question. Put together a cabinet, I use that governmental organization term, a cabinet of staff, adult leaders, and students to help craft that. Get a good perspective, a mix of perspectives. It really informs what you come up with. This is huge. Shared ownership can ensure success, okay? So when there's buy-in, not just tie-in, but buy-in to what's going on, I think success is much more imminent. Those of you that are building or thinking about building, I can't answer everything, we can't answer anything, but is there a burning question you have? This is a great time to ask it right now. Something you're wrestling with or really thinking about. Yep.
We have, in my church, I serve in San Antonio, we have two separate services within our church. You know, a very blended service and a contemporary service, for lack of better terms, right? And I hate those terms, and I say that to the congregation a lot. But our youth primarily attend the contemporary service, which is in a separate venue down the street, which causes a whole lot of different issues. To get them to sing, you know, part of that for us is we have very talented musicians. We're rebuilding in this phase right now the youth praise band and building vocalists in that and moving into building a choir out of some of that. But the idea of where will they sing and what sort of repertoire will they sing moving between those venues, because we'll have to do it in both venues. You know, that's part of it. So that's a unique challenge to us, but I don't think that's a unique challenge in the landscape of churches in this day and age. So
To understand, I want to make sure, so you say that, the very last part of that, of what you're going to do, talking about the two venues.
yeah, so we'll have the youth choir would sing in both venues
Okay.
in our situation.
Yeah,
The ultimate goal is to bring the services back together, but that's a down the road
sure.
goal.
Sure. Well, you know, a quick anecdotal comment is I think that might be one of the best tools you have to bring them back together.
I agree. I
Is
think so.
Using the youth choir in that way.
Absolutely.
It sort of creates some sort of a neutral territory. Oh, we have these students that are a part of our church. Why do we have to do this in both places? That's kind of, you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
I think it generates probably some dialogue that's gonna be really good.
for sure.
Yeah, I say program what your kids can do. And it sounds this way in one venue, it sounds this way in another venue, great.
Yeah.
You know, I would, it needs to work instrumentation-wise with what you can do in the one service and then what you can do in the other service. That's why I say if you can find some stellar a cappella thing, that takes the instrumentation question off the table.
That's a great suggestion.
And that, all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool in the contemporary world. And in the traditional world, they're gonna think the same thing. Like, oh, wow, that sounds really, that's neat. A cappella is always captivating, even if it's, we think of it as maybe the simplest a cappella piece. That's good. Anyone else? Maybe a question you want to throw out there? By the way, I'm sorry, does anyone have any thoughts on that question?
Well, it could be ancillary to a bit, but a lot of the reasons why youth choirs have failed is because we've lost venues that have the necessity or even the practical major. So many students are exposed and have a frame of reference of worship as being, either by a small group or, all of a sudden, well, we want to start doing a youth choir. Well, how weird is that? Does it play into this platform? Does it play into this setting where we have a more modern expression of contemporary song? And so, I guess part of it is how do you adapt, how do you get students to feel like that what they're doing within the context even of a contemporary landscape, those of you that have a traditional and a contemporary service. I think that's something to kind of, if they're going to sing in multiple venues, what does it look like? Because so many churches that try to be so cutting edge in the contemporary expression that if you put a choir up there, it just depends on the bandwidth of what is going to make sense with that church's visuals and all their intangibles and those kinds of things. You have people address that with you often?
I think it just involves looking at choirs in a very non-traditional way.
Yeah.
What is a choir? I guess we go back to that. We're talking about group singing. Your congregation's a choir. So why not get your youth choir trained and spread out across the congregation and stand up and sing from their pews? All of a sudden we have a youth choir in the contemporary service. Depending on the environment, that may or may not work. But start thinking about the presentation matter and the sky's the limit. It really is. Throw an idea so far outside the box you think it will never work, but carry it, see how far it can go. One thing I'm thinking is, if you're starting something, why is the first thought, I just have this over here, why is the first thought that there's a connection into the service? What if you started your youth choir with a sole purpose of being outreach performance driven? They're going to start on a neutral ground. It's not your church. We're getting ready to sing. We're going to go out and we're going to sing once a month. We're going to go visit the senior homes in our area. We're going to go visit these hospitals over the next 4 months, and we're going to sing in the lobby. We're going to go to the children's hospital. Ooh, I guess we missed out everything. But wow, that is powerful. Suddenly, and then they come back like, I imagine thinking, wow, why can't we do this at our church? Then you've planted the seed. And there it goes. There it starts to, I think, get a little bit of root and say like, wow, what a great ministry. Why aren't we doing this for our church? That's when you create the need. That's sort of through the backdoor way of trying to make it happen.
Right.
And I think that's a bit of being gentle as a dove and cunning as a serpent. I think that, I'm curious how that might look if you're starting. Why do we think we have to start it and be directly connected into the service life of the church? Why not connect it directly outside of the service life of the church? And it be a ministry arm. Very interesting.
It's disarming for the students particularly.
Yes, absolutely. Suddenly there's this tension of like, oh, contemporary service, so we go here and we go here. Because this is not something I've really been thinking a lot about, because the church I serve and where I've served, we've always had one unified service. But I know a lot of you live in worlds where you're torn. So how that functions is a really unique thing. It's something I want us to think a little bit more about.
It's a, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that actually answered my question. I was thinking where, I know that if I don't have the youth minister's support, he's not gonna, if he pushes those kids to do something and, hey, we're gonna be at this thing, they'll go and do it. But right now, I mean, and even my pastor has said this, like, we know that our youth minister is not the one equipped to get these kids to wanna sing, to wanna do that. And I respectfully disagree with that, because I think that he does carry a lot of weight, and if it's only coming from me or any of the music, ministers, volunteers, it's not gonna be enough, and so, but I do like that this actually solves the problem of, if it was a conflict with, oh, well, what about, they have to make a choice between going to youth group on that night,
Yes.
then all of a sudden, now, because it's outreach,
Yep.
now, that's actually brilliant.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this, because I'm coming back and our youth choir needs to be renovated, and so I've been thinking about this in my own personal life. Yeah.
I was curious, when you were speaking earlier about not singing in church,
Uh-huh.
were you speaking from a community choir concept?
No.
Not necessarily associated with
It's a
church?
hard sell.
It could be, but why not just have your church youth choir, but their sole purpose, not sole purpose, but initially could be, I mean, you're gonna get kids maybe that come in that aren't with the church, that's gonna happen. We're just gonna go out and serve. Kids that wanna be part of something like that, but they don't have a youth choir at their church. Hey, yeah, come on, more the merrier, let's go, we're gonna go organize canned goods down at the food bank. We're gonna go down to the men's shelter, we're gonna go down to the women's shelter. We're gonna
How
do a
many
little-
times we load them up on a bus and take them on a trip
Yeah.
to do these things in another city?
In your town?
Do it
We've
in your
got
own
a park
town.
right across from our church, and I said, why don't we go across the street and have our guitars and drums?
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the sky's the limit when it comes to where to perform and sing a choir. You know what I mean? It's just, they can go as far as you're wanting to be creative in getting them into spaces. Let's keep going.
Well,
Yeah.
earlier you said, that why don't you sing outside the church? I'm just gonna come from a 10,000-foot view, but
Yeah.
it's outside the church. Everybody's part of the church, universal.
Yeah. Let's see. There we go. Mark Acker, longtime youth choir guru, is known for this statement. Provide teenagers with something they can't find anywhere else. That's the youth choir experience. And then do it better than anyone expects. If you give them something they can't get anywhere else, and friends, this is an experience of youth choir that they cannot get anywhere else if we do it right. And it has all the elements that it should and could have. It's an amazing opportunity. Renovating. For time's sake, I might cut us short here on this, but we were going to have some questions. What is the greatest need in your student choir? Those of you that are thinking about renovating and making some changes. You're changing something because you're trying to accomplish something. There's a need you feel is not being addressed. The key question here, what is working well with my student choir and what is not? And this is where I am right now in my own personal situation. What is working well and what is not? I don't fully know that yet because we haven't met, but I've heard anecdotally where things have been. Thinking back to the construction world, this is touch-ups, right? This is repairs, this is updating, this is gutting out a room, this is painting, this is maybe putting on a new addition. This might include brand new furnishings for the level of your house, or the living spaces, or the bedrooms, right? This is kind of the world we live in when we think of the construction analogy. Benefits. Here's some benefits. If you're taking new leadership and renovating, you've got kids to work with. Isn't that great? You're encouraging and developing pre-existing good habits. I say that because there's some bad habits probably too. If you're taking new leadership. If you're a veteran of leadership, if you've been there for a while, the benefits are you've got relationships built. You've got currency with these people. Perfect. There is a level of trust that already exists. To try some things new, to think out of the box. Sorry, you're making notes there. Some of the challenges. If you're taking new leadership, overcoming what I call pre-existing conditions, right? Maybe that includes the kind of programming material, the traditions that were already there. Maybe there's been some financial floundering, you don't have much budget, okay? Other challenges, renovating around the rubbish of maybe some bad concepts for student choir, and that could include a multitude of things. One of the challenges, especially if you're new and you're wanting to renovate, is showing and helping people to see the need, right? See the need to make some changes, opening their eyes and their hearts to see that change. The challenge is if you've been there and you're wanting to make some changes, if you're a veteran of leadership, answering this question, why change? Why do something different? That's not like we've always done it, right? We all know, we've all been there. It's the same thing. Opening eyes and hearts to see the need for change. Getting everyone off of autopilot. It's very easy, as you may know in ministry, if you've been any place for a length of time, it's easy to get an autopilot. It's easy to get in the wheel tracks and ride along. But to break out of those, the wagon wheel tracks can be hard to get off autopilot. Some of the best practices, I'm just going to throw these up here for you that I think can be helpful, and I'm thinking about some of these again in my personal situation. I'm just going to throw them up here, make your notes as you need. Define or maybe redefining your mission statement. Something as simple as updating it. Are we really doing what we said we wanted to do? Maybe having a think tank for your student choir. Students, parents, church leaders, getting everybody together and say, hey, I wanted to make some things fresh about what we're doing. What are some things maybe we can update? Not just change for change's sake, but is there anything that's been unsettled about what we're doing? Do you think, are we accomplishing our goals? And then there's the discussion of, hey, what are our goals? And seeing what answers come forward. A choir retreat. If you don't do one of these, I highly recommend that you do it. I know it's time. I know you're like, I can't get the kids to come involved. I know all those things. Even if you have 50% of your choir, do it. Do it. It's better than nothing. You can get everyone together, even if it's just for a night. It doesn't have to be an overnight. Those are the best kind. But if you can do just a one-night extended 3 or 4 hours, or a morning or something, or an afternoon, wherever you can make it happen, where you have extended time to talk, to do music, to do fun things, to eat, fellowship, games, interaction with all the kids is great. Student leadership team. And this, again, time, but maybe if you have a team, get them on a retreat. Same thing. Take them out somewhere, 4 or 5 hours somewhere, do some team building. But get to know that leadership and say, hey, what is it we need to be doing that we're not doing? How are we, is this something y'all still want to come to? Is it not? What can we be doing to change? A simple thing, do something you've never done before. And you know what that could be in your context. Just think again, force yourself outside of the box. And you might not know the answer to that, but your think tank, when you throw it out there, they're going to give you some ideas. I heard this idea from, and I just totally blank and forgot his name. Code breaks. This is something I did when I was at Hunter Street the first time, and I met with each student just over Coke, it could be coffee, whatever. Had a little cafe at our church. Hey, use that to your benefit if you have one of those, okay? And just carve out some time. It takes time, friends, no doubt about it. But sit down 10 minutes with each student. 10, 15 minutes. I did that with every student before we went on our mission trip, our summer mission trip. And just had some get to know you questions and just kind of heard what was going on in their life, just back and forth. It was eye-opening. It was amazing. It was really great. Recruiting competition, have a season. Trying to challenge the boys and the girls and some sort of award or prize or pizza party or figure out something, some sort of award for this competition. Consider, we're doing this in September. We're going to have an intergenerational worship service today. All services, or all choirs sing together in mass. So in our situation, we can't necessarily have all choirs, but maybe you could, but we're going to have 7 through 12, and then our senior adult choir, all sing together. We're playing the music, we're being intentional about that. It's going to be a great thing. It just kind of gives them a bigger sense of themselves. Those of you in 2 places, that's interesting to think about. Your senior adults singing over in the contemporary service. Or your teenagers singing in the traditional service. May not be possible. I'm just throwing it out there. In your context, you got to figure it out how it may look. Yep.
I just want to throw something out. So something
Yeah.
we've been doing that I think is one of the good things in our church. There's about 4 fifth Sundays a year,
Mm-hmm.
and so we have a contemporary or a modern service, and then we have a traditional service. But on the 5th Sundays, we have a one service.
Love it.
We all meet together. We start a little like in between time, a little earlier than the traditional service. Which for us, the first service is the modern one, and the second one is the traditional one. But
That's good.
and lots of people, they will say, well, I don't think I'd want this every week because they, like their music and style. But they also say, it's so cool to see the people that are in our church that we never see.
Yeah, we do the exact same
The
thing.
different services.
Yeah, not on Fifth Sundays, but
Right.
Palm Sunday multiple
Special
times a
things.
year during major events.
Very good idea. Thank you for sharing that. That's good. I have a friend who calls it All-In Sundays,
Uh-huh.
where they do this all big mass choir. Even calling them front when the service starts. If they're not up there, hey, you want to sing? Come on up. Even if you're not in one of the choirs. Really great. Also, in Randy's book, he's got a section called 101 Ideas That Really Work. You get that book, find it's in the back. Great stuff there. Really, really good. Let's see here. I love this quote. Nell Noddings. Oh, I'm going to skip that. Sorry. Just for time. Who needs to rebuild? Let's see those hands again. Who is rebuilding or thinking about rebuilding some? I'm going to raise my hand there.
Pretty much.
Yep. Just kind of curious what that is. Any of you want to offer a thought, something you're wrestling with? I'm curious about how our student choir program works with our Sunday afternoon discipleship program, like kind of a sort of a small group thing that our students are doing. And there's collaboration that needs to be a little better between our student ministry. Many of you have heard this, that piece is always a big thing. And how they speak into what our summer mission tour looks like. We've got some ground to plow there. Anybody want to offer anything, what you're wrestling with?
We lost a assistant pastor, youth pastor, and many of the parents and families that were that part of the church that he appealed to have gone, so we're kind of rebuilding, and there's not very many youth to pick and choose from. So it's just kind of, we're in the ashes of the feedings.
He does eventually rise.
A lot of student pastors are under a great deal of pressure, as are all of us. And they're being told that, you may have 1 hour to disciple a student outside of a Sunday morning schedule. And student ministers, view discipleship, missions, Bible, Sunday school as their umbrella. And there's not too many student pastors who really understand this concept of supportive synergy building student choirs. And so if students are going to be involved in that, they're already at a deficit to try to build their programs. And they feel a lot of pressure from executive pastors and senior pastors that if they think if there's a contagious youth choir program going, that's just an additional hour that I'm not going to be able to have them, because if they have to choose between this, and of course this has been the story for decades and decades, but it's even more so that because students only do have so much. And so I think that's an additional, students start to assume that they may be falling out of graces because they're stepping across the line if it's not an all-in, completely interwoven tapestry of ministry together. And that can happen in many larger churches particularly.
Integrating all that together is important and hard. Reimagining. Let's end with the last topic here. Reimagining. I like this quote I found. David Lynch from Catching the Big Fish. Instead of instilling fear, that sounds familiar, he was talking about being afraid. If a company offered a way for everyone in the business to dive within, to start expanding energy and intelligence, people would work overtime they would be far more creative, and the company would just leap forward. This is the way it can be. It's not the way it is, but it could be that way so easily. Very interesting to think about. Free to expand their energy, free in creativity, free in all possibilities. But we all know we feel like we have these limitations. But reimagining what could be. Maybe it's as simple as the choir, think about the choir not being for the service, but being for outside of the community. That's reimagining, I think. Some interaction. Somebody want to offer a thought on this? In the ideal or dream student choir, or 20 years from now, I hope my students remember. Anybody want to take a stab at that?
I talked with one of our former students back when we had an active youth choir. He's now a Marine and has just gone through Paris Island. And he was telling me when things got so tough, his mind would go back to the songs that he had learned.
Yeah. Tw 20 years from now, what do you hope your students might remember?
Being part of something bigger than themselves.
That's good. I've heard it said before, they might not remember everything you sing, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel while they were singing it. That's pretty strong. They will remember songs. They might not remember everything. They will unquestionably remember how they felt about it. Yep.
When I think about, I would want to build a choir that was similar to my youth choir growing up. And that's just the foundation of so many meaningful relationships.
Yeah.
But they were unconditionally loved so that they can unconditionally love.
Amen to that. That's good.
Did they learn how to take not responsibility, but worship, singing, their relationship with God became something they did.
Ownership.
Yes, they took ownership of it and took it out. It was something that they participated in, not something that was done to them.
Yes. Yep. That for versus the with we talked about earlier today. Yeah, that's good. Here's the key question. Maybe I have two up here. What is the legacy of your student choir in 20, 30, or 40 years? It's so easy to see only the immediate. But how are you thinking about 20 or 30 or 40 years from now? And the bigger question in this reimagining your choir is what if? And the possibilities are endless of what that could be. Think about the construction. Going back to that metaphor, how does this look? This is interesting to me when I thought about this. How does that connect? Well, if building and renovating has to do with the structure itself, reimagining has to do with how we view the purpose of the home and the people that live therein. That's interesting to me to think about. How we view the purpose of that building, the purpose of that structure, and the people that will come into it. As my pastor has always said for 30 plus years, the church is not a building, it's people. I saw a teacher one time that said in front, stop going to church. Real big. And turn around the back, be the church. I think it's really important when you think about reimagining what the choir could be. Some best practices, quickly. Think about your goals. The big question, what are you trying to achieve? You may have heard of SMART goals, okay? This idea of, I've already forgotten the S, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time sensitive, okay? Get student feedback on that. Get parent feedback. What are the goals you're trying to achieve with your choir? Go visit other choir programs. See what they're doing. It might take driving and having a Sunday off in the afternoon and not having rehearsal to go talk and spend some time with people who are doing it and battling it out together. Exit interviews. If you have a choir, those that are graduating, try to carve out some time. Say, hey, can we go have coffee sometime? I just want to have a little. It sounds very formal to say exit interview in the business world, you know, right? But just some time to ask them some really pointed questions about, hey, what's this experience like for you? If you had to do it all over again, what would you like to see? What's the one thing you would tell a new person coming into this choir that they need to know? Or what to look forward to? Reconsider adult leadership. What do I mean by that? Randy Edwards has a great quote. Some of us think that we are disqualified from adult leadership, or certain people are disqualified from helping lead with us. I like what he says here. The issue is not age, it's energy. It's not looks, it's love. That's the kind of adult leadership you need. Other practices. I mentioned this in an earlier session. Sing and serve. The choir that just sings, I feel, will never actually exist. A church youth choir. That choir must sing and serve. And I'm not meaning just singing in worship. That's singing in the service. But serving, being the hands and feet of Jesus. Going somewhere, doing something that leaves a place different after they leave. Okay? That can happen from singing, but it needs to happen from being the hands and feet of Jesus. I really believe that. Expand, maybe considering your reach to include other creative arts. Maybe tracks, maybe small groups that your choir breaks out and they learn different ways to be engaged in creative arts. And maybe take this on your tour and do a creative arts ministry type VBS experience and teach kids in a community or an apartment complex different creative arts skills, whether it's speech, or it's music, or it's handbells, or bring it back from the 80s, puppets, you know, I mean, whatever it could be. I mean, there's the possibilities, again, are endless there. Orff instruments, banging on instruments, stomp stuff, trash can beating, rhythm. I mean, you can do all sorts of different things that you could include. Oh, sorry about that. Look down the road. I mentioned this earlier. They might not remember the music you sing, but they'll remember how you made them feel while singing. Looking down the road, very important. Building in a love for God, a love for the scriptures, and enjoyment in music. This is going to take time, patience. I'm saying this to myself. It takes sensitivity and fewer sermons in rehearsal, okay? It takes time to do this. Moving your students into a commitment that's upward, that's Godward. Not commitment to necessarily just each other or to you, but a commitment to the Lord and learning what that looks like, how to embrace and own their faith. That's reimagining for us, I think. This phrase you've heard before, work yourself out of a job. In your guiding and leading your choir, couldn't it exist if you were not there? On a Sunday, or 2 Sundays, or you get sick. Have you empowered adult leadership or students to step in and know what it means to make this thing happen without yourself? That is the goal of ministry. I had a youth pastor teach me that when I was an intern. He said the goal of ministry is to work yourself out of a job. That you have empowered and trained the lay members to do the works of ministry. Paul Solomonovich, longtime director of the Los Angeles Master Chorale. He has a video called Chant and Beyond. He said this, they can do without you because you have given them the way and the know-how. Our president at Lee University said this one time. He said, dream big and work small. When he came to the university over 30 years ago, they had all these big master plans out for big campus expansion. They had just all sorts of stuff, you know, but he looked outside. Nobody was walking around the campus. There was no sort of energy. Nobody was out recruiting students. Nobody was cutting the grass. They had all these plans, but nobody was working small. Nobody was doing the mundane, day in, day out, routine things. Dream big and work small. This, friends, is the kicker. Reimagine not your choir. And I'm speaking to myself. But reimagine yourself. What you can do. Who you are. And the impact that you could make. If you do that, the ministry piece is going to take care of itself. I really believe that. Here's a great quote. It's a long one, but stick with it. A leader is someone with the power to project either shadow or light onto some part of the world and onto the lives of the people who dwell there. A leader shapes the ethos in which others must live, an ethos as light-filled as heaven or as shadowy as hell. A good leader is intensely aware of the interplay of inner shadow and light, lest the act of leadership do more harm than good. Good leadership comes from people who have penetrated their own inner darkness and arrived at the place where we are at one with one another. People who can lead the rest of us to a place of hidden wholeness because they have been there and know the way. Parker Palmer finishes up. Everything in us cries out against it, which is why we externalize everything. It is so much easier to deal with the external world, to spend our lives manipulating material and institutions and other people instead of dealing with our own souls. We like to talk about the outer world as if it were infinitely complex and demanding, but it is a cakewalk compared to the labyrinth of our inner lives. When we reimagine ourselves and what we can be as leaders, all the things we touch begin to change because we're different. And that's how I think true reimagination of what our ministries may be, how it's very possible. As civilization advances, the sense of wonder declines. Such decline is an alarming symptom of our state of mind. Mankind will not perish for want of information, but for want of appreciation. The beginning of our happiness lies in the understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. What we lack is not a will to believe, but a will to wonder. Howard Swan, I love this. When a mutual and sympathetic understanding of the human spirit is built, people finally become persons. When we reimagine what we're doing in our choirs, we are helping build people. We are not the sole person to do it, but we are helping build people with God's help, with faith. And how do we help them wonder what could be? Thanks so much for being here. I certainly will take some questions if you have any. I know we're out of time. Here's my contact information if you wanted to write that down or ask a question about something later. But thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any questions before we go? Comments for the good of the order? I wanted to have more time for that. That was a lot of information. Is this helpful?
Yes, thank you, John.
Thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of the time. I'm going to be here till Friday, so step me in the hall or something if you want to talk about anything. I'm